In the crackling glow of 4th of July fireworks, the air thick with the scent of charcoal and sugar-laced corn, my son's voice cut through the night like a knife. "I wish you'd vanish from my life." Beneath the stars, his laughter tinkled like broken glass against the festive hum. My hand froze as a hot dog dripped mustard from my trembling fingers. Moments later, flashing red and blue strobes pierced the darkness, and sheriff's cruisers rolled into my yard. What happened next would change everything. Before we continue into this remarkable story of family betrayal and unexpected justice, if you treasure heartfelt tales of resilience and second chances, please subscribe to our channel and tap the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We share new stories every week that celebrate the power of boundaries and redemption. Let us know where you're watching from by dropping a quick comment below. Thank you for being part of our community. Now, back to Michael's 4th of July night. Evening had settled into a warm, golden hush over East Brook when I stepped onto the broad cedar deck of my suburban home. Strings of white lights crisscrossed overhead, mingling with distant fireworks that stained the sky in bursts of scarlet and cobalt. Children's laughter drifted from the street below as neighbors paused their own celebrations to watch. I had spent hours draping red and white checked tablecloths across 2 picnic tables, arranging platters of buttery corn, homemade slaw in enamel bowls, and trays of burgers sizzling on the grill. The humid air smelled of charcoal and summer grasses carried on a gentle breeze. I adjusted my grandfather's weathered Stetson, a family heirloom passed down through generations, and scanned the yard. Beneath a flag that snapped crisply in the wind, Andrew stood by the railing, arms folded and jaw set. 3 of his college friends leaned against the table, clasping cups of iced tea and local craft beer. Their chatter mingled with the crackle of handheld sparklers. Every face here was a reminder of tradition, of how I had taught my son to respect home, heritage, and the bonds forged in gatherings just like this one. A friend called out, "Great setup, Mr. Bauer." Tone friendly until Andrew's flat laugh dampened the moment. I watched his gaze meet mine, the warmth in his eyes vanishing into cold calculation. "This is nice and all, Dad," he said casually, "but you know what I really want? I want you to disappear from my life forever." Laughter followed, ricocheting against the deckboards like stones. The world tilted beneath me, and the cedar planks felt slick under my boots. Time fractured then. Memories flooded. His first steps across the living room floor, birthday parties lit by shimmering candles, the pride I felt introducing him at graduation. My palm pressed the smooth cedar railing, knuckles whitening as hurt and disbelief coiled in my chest. The scent of sweet grass and lingering barbecue smoke clung to the humid air, but all I could taste was iron bitterness. I drew a slow, steady breath and made a choice. Enough forgiveness, enough endurance. Tonight, I would no longer be dismissed. I turned and walked into the house, each step echoing on cool tile. Inside, kitchen lights glowed warmly, illuminating family photos lining the walls. Him at 8 years old clutching a t-ball trophy, his grin bright at high school graduation, summer picnics beneath oak trees. None of those moments could shield me now. My hand slid into my pocket and found my phone, its screen glowing with the sheriff's office number I had dialed twice before. I pressed call, voice firm despite the shake. "This is Michael Bauer, 345 Maple Drive. Please send deputies immediately." Each ring echoed in the silent kitchen, the screen's glow reflecting my determined eyes. Deep in the distance, the first wail of approaching sirens slashed through the leftover fireworks crackle, a grim herald of the reckoning to come. Beneath the soft glow still flickering overhead, I realized that tonight the battle for respect had truly begun, and there would be no turning back. The kitchen was bathed in the soft glow of under-cabinet lights, a warm contrast to the chaos outside. The lingering scent of apple pie mixed with the sharp tang of charcoal smoke clinging to my clothes. I leaned my forehead against the cool marble countertop, each breath pulling in the echoes of laughter that had turned to jeers just moments before. My fingers traced the photo frames lining the backsplash. Andrew, at 8 years old, eyes shining as he clutched his first Little League trophy. His graduation day, mortarboard tilted askew as he beamed for the camera. Those smiles felt like relics from another lifetime. I slid back from the counter and paced toward the window overlooking the deck. The cedar planks gleamed faintly under the porch light, but no one stood there now. Just the silent aftermath of celebration turned sour. How had my efforts to build traditions become the foundation for disdain? The question pounded in my chest, louder than any firework. I exhaled slowly and let the ache settle into a cold resolve. Turning away from the window, I spotted my phone resting by the coffee maker, its screen still displaying the sheriff's office number I'd dialed moments ago. Below it appeared another contact, Michelle Johnson, Realtor. My thumb hovered over her name before I tapped. The line rang once, twice, and then a calm, professional voice answered. "Michael, good evening," Michelle said. "Michelle, I need to sell my home, 345 Maple Drive, urgently," I replied, voice tight. "I understand," she said. "Given today's events and Memorial Day weekend, buyers are already searching." "I can have my staging team there at 9 tomorrow, and we'll list by early afternoon." "List at," I prompted, swallowing. "850,000, she said. "With your renovations and timing, we'll spark a bidding war." "Thank you," I said, relief and dread mingling in my throat. "I'll see you at 9. "Talk soon, Michael." I ended the call and returned to the countertop, the finality of Michelle's words echoing in my mind. In 24 hours, strangers would roam these rooms, placing value on walls I had filled with love and loyalty. The thought both comforted and unsettled me. I poured a glass of water, its clarity mocking the turbulence in my thoughts. Passing the refrigerator, I noticed magnets holding grocery lists and more photographs, family barbecues, holiday dinners, vacations at the lake. Each image once symbolized belonging. Now they felt like taunts. I pulled one free, a snapshot of Andrew and me tossing a football under an October sky. The grass below our feet had been green and promising. The sky had been golden with possibility. I folded the picture and slipped it into my pocket, a silent keepsake of hopes I had nurtured. My gaze drifted to the pantry door, where cans of soup and pasta jars stood in neat rows, emblems of countless dinners I had prepared without complaint. For years, I had poured myself into providing, believing devotion alone would yield respect. Tonight proved otherwise. I turned off the kitchen lights, plunging the room into darkness, save for the faint glow of streetlights through the curtains. In the hush, I climbed the stairs toward my home office, each step measured, deliberate. The hardwood creaked familiarly beneath my boots, sounding almost like an admission of guilt. I opened my laptop and bookmarked Michelle's email chain, the heading "Listing Confirmation" glowing with promise. Then I powered down and closed the lid, the click resounding like a door shutting on my old life. As I descended back to the ground floor, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The house that had once been a testament to my love would soon become a platform for new beginnings, for buyers who valued walls more than memories. And I, Michael Bauer, 60 years old, stood at the threshold of reclaiming respect, not through sacrifice, but through decisive action. Stepping onto the deck, I felt the humid air wrap around me like a damp cloak. The cedar boards creaked underfoot, their honeyed grain still warm from the day's sun. Above, strings of white bulbs cast a soft glow across the gathering, turning anxious faces into ghostly silhouettes. A faint breeze carried the sharp tang of spilled beer and the smoke from earlier fireworks, mingling with the scent of crushed grass beneath the railing. Andrew stood at the center of the picnic table, arms folded, his gaze fixed on me as if daring me to hesitate. 3 friends flanked him, each clutching a plastic cup, their laughter silenced by my return. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing through the sudden hush. The sharp click of a sparker snapping out of light broke the silence for an instant, a mocking punctuation. I inhaled, tasting the humid sweetness of summer on my tongue. Memories flickered behind my eyes. His first wobbly bike ride down Maple Street, the grin that had lit up his face when he'd finally pedaled free of training wheels. Tonight, that same grin bore the weight of contempt. I let my hand rest on the railing's smooth edge, feeling its coolness steady me as I drew a measured breath. "Andrew," I began, voice low but unwavering, "you've crossed a line no son should ever cross." My tone held quiet authority, the calm after a storm. He met my eyes, expression flat. "I asked you to leave my property," I continued, "and you refused. You publicly wished I would vanish. That isn't just disrespect, it's a declaration of war." A friend snorted behind him, the sound harsh in the night air. Andrew shifted, his shoulders squaring. "Then vanish," he shot back, voice casual as tossing a coin. "Let's see if you'll really do it." Heat flared in my chest, but I harnessed it, letting resolve harden my words. "I'm giving you one final chance," I said, each syllable deliberate. "Gather your things and clear this deck before I call the deputies back. No more warnings." My heart pounded in my ears, but I stood firm, the deck beneath me an unyielding platform. Andrew laughed, a brittle edge to the sound, and raised his beer in a lazy salute. The droplets that splashed onto the wood shimmered under the lights like mocking stars. "Call them," he said, voice steady, "and watch me walk straight into cuffs, on my own turf." The group stirred, uneasy glances exchanged as the gravity of his dare sank in. I could hear cicadas thrumming in the nearby hedges, their summer chorus now a distant counterpoint to the tension here. The flag overhead snapped in the breeze, its stars and stripes a silent witness to my next move. I felt every fiber of my being tighten with purpose. Years of silent endurance and unreciprocated generosity had led to this moment. Now, respect would be reclaimed, not through words, but through action. I raised my chin and nodded slightly, signaling the end of parley. In that suspended instant, time seemed to stretch. Andrew's smirk, his friend's shifting feet, the soft glow of the string lights all hung in a fragile balance. The next sound would be the siren's wail or the crack of my own phone dialing 911. Either way, the course of our lives would be forever altered. Stepping onto the deck, I felt the humid air wrap around me like a damp cloak. The cedar boards creaked underfoot, their honeyed grain still warm from the day's sun. Above, strings of white bulbs cast a soft glow across the gathering, turning anxious faces into ghostly silhouettes. A faint breeze carried the sharp tang of spilled beer and the smoke from earlier fireworks, mingling with the scent of crushed grass beneath the railing. Andrew stood at the center of the picnic table, arms folded, his gaze fixed on me as if daring me to hesitate. 3 friends flanked him, each clutching a plastic cup, their laughter silenced by my return. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing through the sudden hush. The sharp click of a sparker snapping out of light broke the silence for an instant, a mocking punctuation. I inhaled, tasting the humid sweetness of summer on my tongue. Memories flickered behind my eyes. His first wobbly bike ride down Maple Street, the grin that had lit up his face when he'd finally pedaled free of training wheels. Tonight, that same grin bore the weight of contempt. I let my hand rest on the railing's smooth edge, feeling its coolness steady me as I drew a measured breath. "Andrew," I began, voice low but unwavering, "you've crossed a line no son should ever cross." My tone held quiet authority, the calm after a storm. He met my eyes, expression flat. "I asked you to leave my property," I continued, "and you refused. You publicly wished I would vanish. That isn't just disrespect, It's a declaration of war." A friend snorted behind him, the sound harsh in the night air. Andrew shifted, his shoulders squaring. "Then vanish," he shot back, voice casual as tossing a coin. "Let's see if you'll really do it." Heat flared in my chest, but I harnessed it, letting resolve harden my words. "I'm giving you one final chance," I said, each syllable deliberate. "Gather your things and clear this deck before I call the deputies back. No more warnings." My heart pounded in my ears, but I stood firm, the deck beneath me an unyielding platform. Andrew laughed, a brittle edge to the sound, and raised his beer in a lazy salute. The droplets that splashed onto the wood shimmered under the lights like mocking stars. "Call them," he said, voice steady, "and watch me walk straight into cuffs on my own turf." The group stirred, uneasy glances exchanged as the gravity of his dare sank in. I could hear cicadas thrumming in the nearby hedges, their summer chorus now a distant counterpoint to the tension here. The flag overhead snapped in the breeze, its stars and stripes a silent witness to my next move. I felt every fiber of my being tighten with purpose. Years of silent endurance and unreciprocated generosity had led to this moment. Now, respect would be reclaimed not through words, but through action. I raised my chin and nodded slightly, signaling the end of parley. In that suspended instant, time seemed to stretch. Andrew's smirk, his friend's shifting feet, the soft glow of the string lights all hung in a fragile balance. The next sound would be the siren's wail or the crack of my own phone dialing 911. Either way, the course of our lives would be forever altered. Stepping off the deck and onto the dew-soaked grass, I felt the sudden authority of the law settle around me like armor. The first cruiser's headlights carved through the darkness, illuminating the pale cedar of the deck and the cluster of young faces standing frozen near the picnic table. A second cruiser idled behind it, its red and blue beacons pulsing with deliberate rhythm. The night sky, still scented with smoke and summer blossoms, had become a stage for a reckoning I had summoned. Deputy Miller exited the front vehicle, boots crunching on the gravel driveway. His uniform was crisp, badge gleaming under the porch light. He offered a firm nod as he approached. Behind him, Deputy Gark held a clipboard, pen poised to record every detail. The soft drone of the cruiser's engines filled the tense silence. "Mr. Bauer?" Miller asked, voice professional and even. I nodded, my shirt sticking to my back with humidity. "Yes, Deputy." I reached into my pocket and retrieved my driver's license along with the latest property tax statement. The paper felt thin yet undeniable in my hand. "Here are my credentials and proof of ownership." Gark scanned the documents under her flashlight's beam, her brow furrowing with focus. Crickets trilled in the hedges as if accompanying the exchange. "Thank you, sir," she said, handing them back. Miller tucked them into his jacket and turned toward the young men. "You've been ordered to leave private property," he announced, voice carrying across the yard. "Continued presence will constitute criminal trespassing. Please gather your belongings and step off the premises." Andrew's friends shifted uneasily, eyes flicking between him and the deputies. He stepped forward, chin lifted. "Officer, this is my home too," he protested, tone edged with arrogance. "You can't just kick us out." His words floated into the humid air, met only by the distant echo of sparklers fizzling out. Miller's expression remained calm. "Ownership matters," he replied. "Mr. Bauer holds legal title. You have no right to authorize guests against his wishes. Step off now, or I will have to place you under arrest." The phrase landed like a hammer blow. The deputies' stances shifted subtly, a quiet promise of action. A tense beat passed before Andrew's bravado cracked. He glanced at his friends, then back at me. "You're serious?" he rasped. Miller nodded once, hand resting near his belt. Gark unrolled her notepad. "Sir, you have one final opportunity to leave," she said quietly. "Failure to comply will result in criminal charges.
Her tone was respectful yet immovable, like the wall I had built around my own boundaries. Andrew's jaw clenched. He threw a look at his friends and then back at me. The last ember of defiance burned in his eyes. "Don't do this," he warned, voice low. "You don't want to drag family into this." But his lips trembled. He knew the law was on my side.
Slowly, he raised his hands and allowed the deputies to slip handcuffs around his wrists. The metal clicked shut in a sound too final for a son and father. I watched him straighten, shoulders hunched, as Gark recited his rights in a calm voice. The subtle scent of aftershave mingled with the night air, a reminder of happier times now shadowed by concrete justice. Miller guided Andrew toward the cruiser, each step measured and deliberate. The soft thud of boots on grass echoed in the hush. I crossed back onto the deck, chest tight, and pressed my palm to the railing's smooth surface, feeling its cool solidity beneath my fingers. The sheriff's lights slowed and then turned off, as the cruiser backed away, its sirens silent but the message clear. Respect, once eroded, had been restored. In the aftermath, Andrew's friends melted into the night, leaving empty cups and scraps of paper behind. Firework sparks had long since faded, and the deck lights glowed softly in the stillness. I inhaled deeply, tasting the sharp promise of newfound authority and the bitter residue of fractured family ties. The law had spoken, and my home was finally mine again. Stepping into the sterile lobby of Santa Clara County Jail just before noon, I felt the hum of fluorescent lights press in around me. The faint tang of disinfectant mingled with the distant clank of cell doors. I approached the visitor desk and set my ID and the email printout before the corrections clerk. "Mr. Bauer," she confirmed, voice polite but detached. "Your son, Andrew Bauer, is scheduled for release tomorrow at 9 a.m. through the main entrance." I nodded, heart tightening at the precision of her words. "Thank you," I said. No guest pass, no visit, just the bare facts that sealed our destinies. Back in my car, I let the engine run a moment, staring at the jail's gray walls. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., a countdown ticking down to the moment when Andrew would walk free, expecting to return to his comfort zone. Instead, he would face the consequence I had orchestrated. I pressed the printout against my thigh as I drove away, the highway's hum underlining the inevitability of redemption through accountability. The next morning, I parked a discreet distance from our old house and watched through the windshield as Andrew's sedan turned onto Maple Drive. He stepped out, silhouetted by the rising sun, carrying nothing but a duffel bag his jail-issued clothes had been folded into. His stride was hesitant, eyes narrowing as he took in the sight before him. Where once stood familiar cedar planks and flag-draped railings, now a "sold" sign loomed in the front yard. Fresh hydrangeas framed the walkway, and a discreet open house flag fluttered in the breeze. Two strangers, Carlos and Maria, moved boxes off a rented trailer, their children chasing a Labrador puppy across the lawn. The scene should have been welcoming. To Andrew, it was a betrayal writ large in stucco and siding. He froze at the curb, the duffel slipping from his fingers. The metal handle struck the pavement with a hollow thud. I stepped out of my car and closed the distance slowly, giving him space to process. His shoulders sagged as recognition dawned, then collapsed in defeat.
He glanced at me, eyes rimmed red from restless nights, and possibly from tears that had gone unshed. "Dad?" he rasped, voice cracking as the dam of denial broke. He ran a hand through his hair, then bent to retrieve the duffel. The new owners paused, children pressed against their mother's skirt, watching a drama that had become painfully intimate. Maria offered a hesitant smile, stepping forward with a single white envelope in her hand. "This was left for you," she said softly. Andrew's fingers trembled as he took the envelope, its weight far heavier than paper. He turned to me without opening it, gaze pleading for an explanation I could not soften. I simply nodded toward the envelope. He exhaled with a shuddering breath and ripped the seal. Inside, 4 lines in my precise script waited. "You said you wanted me gone from your life. I'm granting that wish. This house has been sold, and I will be unreachable indefinitely. You now have the independence you demanded. Dad." The paper quivered in his grip as comprehension spread across his face like cold water. His legs buckled, and he sank to the top step of the new porch, letter falling to the boards at his feet. The strangers watched, compassion and awkward curiosity mingling in their faces. I returned to my car without a word. Through the windshield, I saw Andrew fold the letter, clutch it to his chest, and bury his face in his hands. The puppy loped over to snick at the envelope, then wandered back to its family. The morning light glinted off the sold sign, as though a spotlight had been cast on the final act of our family drama. In that moment, I felt both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the son whose world I had upended. Relief that at last respect had been restored through consequences rather than entreaties. As I turned the key in the ignition, I knew the next chapter of both our lives would be written far from this porch, bound by lessons neither of us would ever forget. I inhaled the humid night air, tasting the sharp tang of spilled beer and lingering charcoal as I reclaimed the deck beneath my boots. The cedar boards creaked softly, their honeyed grains still warm from earlier sun and barbecue flames. Overhead, a single string of white bulbs cast wary pools of light across Andrew and his friends gathered by the picnic table. The distant pops of remaining fireworks felt out of place now. Echoes of celebration turned bitter. Andrew stood at the center, arms folded, his smirk illuminated in the glow. His 2 closest friends leaned in, nodding encouragement. A half-empty beer bottle dangled from one friend's fingers. The faint scent of citrus hops drifted in the still air. I pressed my palm to the railing's smooth edge, feeling its solidity anchor me as I drew a steady breath. "Andrew," I began, voice low but carrying, "this ends tonight." My words cut through the hush, and the friends straightened, surprise registering on their faces. The soft rustle of wind in the nearby trees underscored the sudden quiet. He lifted an eyebrow. "Oh?" he replied, tone flat. "And what exactly do you plan to do, Dad?" The question hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. I let the memory of his casual cruelty fuel my resolve. "You publicly wished I would vanish. You refused to leave when asked. That's more than disrespect. It's trespass." The words landed deliberate, each one measured. "I'm giving you one final chance to clear my property before I call the authorities." A friend chuckled nervously, sharp, discordant. Andrew's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing," he said, stepping forward. His voice trembled on the edge of defiance and doubt. "This is my party too." I exhaled slowly, the deck's faint fragrance of pine filling my lungs. "Your party ended when you chose contempt over gratitude." I met his glare head-on. "Pack up your things now and escort your friends off this deck. Do it within the next 5 minutes. No excuses." His friends shifted uneasily, glancing at each other. Somewhere beyond the fence, a cicada's drone swelled, a natural chorus mourning the collapse of what had been a festive evening. The sparklers in Andrew's other friend's hand flickered and died. Silence stretched taut. Andrew's lips curled into a mocking half-smile. He lifted his beer bottle in a slow, mocking salute. "Call them," he said softly. "Let's see how far you'll go." My chest tightened, heat pooling behind my ribs. The cool cedar beneath my fingers felt like steel. In one motion, I stepped back toward the house, voice calm. "Watch me." My hand hovered over my pocket, where my phone lay ready. Time seemed to pause as Andrew's facade faltered, just for an instant.
His bravado wavered, and I sensed the line between performance and reality blur. When he inhaled sharply, I knew the moment of truth had arrived. The deck lights glimmered, waiting. And in that pregnant silence, I realized respect, once lost, would now be reclaimed by unyielding action. I felt the grass beneath my feet grow cool as the first sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop at the end of the driveway, its headlights slicing through the gathering twilight. The air smelled of damp cedar and crushed grass, mingled with the sharp tang of barbecue smoke that clung stubbornly to my shirt. My heart hammered, but my mind sharpened, each beat forging my resolve into steel as I stepped forward to meet the law I had summoned. Deputy Miller exited the vehicle first, his polished badge reflecting the porch light's glow. His boots crunched on the gravel, sending small stones rattling across the lawn. The second cruiser idled behind, its red and blue lights pulsing in rhythmic cadence, casting frantic patterns on the house siding. I swallowed against the lump of tension in my throat and raised my hand. "Deputy Miller," I called, voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, uniform crisp even in the sweat-soaked humidity. Behind him, Deputy Gark held a clipboard and flashlight, pen poised like an extension of her authority. Miller approached, eyes scanning the group of stunned college friends clustered by the picnic table. "Mr. Bauer," he said, voice neutral, "you called concerning unlawful presence?" I produced my driver's license and the most recent property tax bill, its edges sharp in my hand. "Yes, sir. This property is mine, 345 Maple Drive." I passed the documents up, watching Gark's flashlight beam trace the fine print. A cicada's chorus thrummed in the hedge as Gark flipped pages and nodded to Miller. "Thank you," she replied, handing the papers back. He tucked them into his jacket pocket and lifted his gaze to the young men. "Mr. Bauer has requested you vacate private property. Continued presence constitutes criminal trespass. Please gather your belongings and step off the premises now." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Andrew's smirk faltered for an instant. He propped an elbow on the picnic table, cross-legged with defiance. "Officer," he said, voice tight, "this is my home too. I have every right to be here." His words crackled like embers in a dying fire. Miller's expression stayed calm. "Ownership matters, son," he replied evenly. He stepped closer, the beam of his flashlight glinting off the night air. "Mr. Bauer holds sole title. You have no authority to override his wishes." His words landed like a gavel. Andrew's chest rose and fell in a tense breath. His friends shifted, discomfort fluttering over their shoulders. One placed a hand on Andrew's arm, but he shrugged it off, chin lifting in stubborn challenge. "You're making a mistake," he spat. Miller glanced at me, nodding once. In perfect unison, Gark reached for handcuffs from her belt. The cold metal whispered as it opened, its promise unmistakable. Andrew's facade cracked when he felt the deputy's steady grip on his wrist. He jerked, surprise flashing across his face, mouth opening but no words came. The snap of cuffs closing echoed with finality. A tension-releasing exhale escaped my lips as I watched him straighten, head bowed for the first time. Gark recited the charge: criminal trespass and failure to comply with a lawful order. Her tone was flat, professional, unsparing. The friends melted back, leaving only scattered red solo cups and the hush of consequence. Miller motioned toward the cruiser. "Sir, step into the vehicle." Andrew's boots struck each step toward the open door, echoing in the hush as the red and blue glow swept over him one last time.
I turned my gaze upward to the American flag, its stars sharp against the dark sky, silent witness to the boundary restored by law.
When the engine roared and the cruisers pulled away, the pulsating lights faded into the night, leaving behind a hush broken only by distant traffic. I crossed back onto the deck, each step echoing on the cedar planks, and pressed my palm to the railing's cool surface, tasting the sharp promise of restored dignity. The deck lights glowed soft in the aftermath, testaments to a respect reclaimed not through placation but through the unmistakable force of consequence. I felt the grass beneath my feet grow cool as the first sheriff's cruiser rolled to a stop at the end of the driveway, its headlights slicing through the gathering twilight. The air smelled of damp cedar and crushed grass, mingled with the sharp tang of barbecue smoke that clung stubbornly to my shirt. My heart hammered, but my mind sharpened, each beat forging my resolve into steel as I stepped forward to meet the law I had summoned. Deputy Miller exited the vehicle first, his polished badge reflecting the porch light's glow. His boots crunched on the gravel, sending small stones rattling across the lawn. The second cruiser idled behind, its red and blue lights pulsing in rhythmic cadence, casting frantic patterns on the house siding. I swallowed against the lump of tension in my throat and raised my hand. "Deputy Miller," I called, voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, uniform crisp even in the sweat-soaked humidity. Behind him, Deputy Gark held a clipboard and flashlight, pen poised like an extension of her authority. Miller approached, eyes scanning the group of stunned college friends clustered by the picnic table. "Mr. Bauer," he said, voice neutral, "you called concerning unlawful presence?" I produced my driver's license and the most recent property tax bill, its edges sharp in my hand. "Yes, sir, this property is mine, 345 Maple Drive." I passed the documents up, watching Gark's flashlight beam trace the fine print. The cicada's chorus thrummed in the hedge as Gark flipped pages and nodded to Miller. "Thank you," she replied, handing the papers back. He tucked them into his jacket pocket and lifted his gaze to the young men. "Mr. Bauer has requested you vacate private property. Continued presence constitutes criminal trespass. Please gather your belongings and step off the premises now." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. Andrew's smirk faltered for an instant. He propped an elbow on the picnic table, cross-legged with defiance. "Officer," he said, voice tight, "this is my home too. I have every right to be here." His words crackled like embers in a dying fire. Miller's expression stayed calm. "Ownership matters, son," he replied evenly. He stepped closer, the beam of his flashlight glinting off the night air. "Mr. Bauer holds sole title. You have no authority to override his wishes." His words landed like a gavel. Andrew's chest rose and fell in a tense breath. His friends shifted, discomfort fluttering over their shoulders. One placed a hand on Andrew's arm, but he shrugged it off, chin lifting in stubborn challenge. "You're making a mistake," he spat. Miller glanced at me, nodding once. In perfect unison, Gark reached for handcuffs from her belt. The cold metal whispered as it opened, its promise unmistakable. Andrew's facade cracked when he felt the deputy's steady grip on his wrist. He jerked, surprise flashing across his face, mouth opening, but no words came. The snap of cuffs closing echoed with finality. A tension-releasing exhale escaped my lips as I watched him straighten, head bowed for the first time. Gark recited the charge: criminal trespass and failure to comply with a lawful order. Her tone was flat, professional, unsparing. The friends melted back, leaving only scattered red Solo cups and the hush of consequence. Miller motioned toward the cruiser. "Sir, step into the vehicle." Andrew's boots struck each step toward the open door, echoing in the hush as the red and blue glow swept over him one last time. I turned my gaze upward to the American flag, its stars sharp against the dark sky, silent witness to the boundary restored by law. When the engine roared and the cruisers pulled away, the pulsating lights faded into the night, leaving behind a hush broken only by distant traffic.
I crossed back onto the deck, each step echoing on the cedar planks, and pressed my palm to the railing's cool surface, tasting the sharp promise of restored dignity. The deck lights glowed soft in the aftermath, testaments to a respect reclaimed, not through placation, but through the unmistakable force of consequence. I stepped into the hush of my home office, the faint creak of the hinge echoing as I closed the door. A single desk lamp cast a warm pool of light over spreadsheets, bank statements, and yellowing receipts spread across the oak desktop. The air smelled of aged paper and printer toner, an unexpected comfort after the tense night. I sank into my black leather chair, its cushion yielding beneath me, and tapped a stack of financial summaries that detailed every expense I had borne for Andrew's upbringing. I began with a column marked Rent Equivalent. At today's suburban rates, a two-bedroom apartment in East Brook leased for roughly $2,800 per month. Utilities, electricity, water, gas, internet added another $350. Groceries, household supplies, and routine maintenance averaged $800. Insurance premiums, property taxes, and lawn care pushed the monthly total to about $4,200. I highlighted the row, then dragged my finger down to the years column, 29. The calculator's screen blinked $1,461,600. Over $1 million funneled into a life that had repaid me with contempt. I registered the number with a hollow ache, the desk lamp's glow suddenly too bright.
Nights spent balancing budgets by lamplight. Mornings dropping Andrew off at his first day of school in a hand-me-down tie. Afternoons watching him master the art of pitching a baseball. Each dollar had been a vote of confidence in his future, yet tonight every vote felt like a debt unpaid. Straightening, I reached for my phone and dialed Michelle Johnson, whose professionalism I had tested earlier. It rang twice before she answered with measured warmth. "Michael," she said. "Michelle, I have the figures," I replied, voice tight but controlled. "I need your recommendation." "Given your updates in market demand, I'd list at $850,000, she stated. "With the Memorial Day weekend buzz, we can launch tomorrow. I'll send the paperwork for your signature." "A bonus structure?" I asked, already knowing the answer. $5,000 if we close within 7 days, she confirmed. "Understood," I said, exhaling. "Email it tonight. I'll review and return it." "Perfect. See you first thing at 9. I hung up and let the phone rest against my ear for a moment, the click of the line disconnecting, resonating like a final punctuation. Pushing back from the desk, I walked over to the window overlooking the deck where it had all begun. The string lights were still in place, now silent sentinels waiting for new occupants. Returning to the desk, I opened the email from Michelle. The contract detailed listing price, marketing strategies, staging timelines, and legal disclosures. I reviewed each clause with deliberate care, the couch of my attention unwavering. When the bonus clause glowed in footnotes, I felt a spark of satisfaction. My resources would now serve me rather than subsidize scorn. Sliding the signed PDF back to Michelle's inbox, I heard the soft ping of confirmation. The plan was in motion. Staging crews would arrive at 9, professional photographers the next day, and open houses would flood interest. I leaned back, letting the leather cradle me as the weight of months of planning lifted from my shoulders. In that moment, I realized something profound. I had traded years of silent enabling for a single, decisive action. Financial calculations and legal paperwork had crystallized into freedom. As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the night sky, I turned off the desk lamp and headed downstairs. Outside, the quiet of early morning greeted me, promising a chance to rebuild on my own terms. I pushed open the back door to the soft hiss of its track, and the cool morning air brushed against my face, carrying a hint of dew and the distant murmur of the staging van's engine. The yard lay quiet, the deck's cedar planks still damp with overnight moisture. I watched as Sarah and her team unpacked crisp white slipcovers, decorative pillows in muted hues, and vases of fresh tulips. The air smelled of damp pine and the subtle sweetness of budding blooms, an oddly soothing contrast to last night's tension. Inside, the scent of varnished hardwood mingled with the earthy aroma of eucalyptus when Sarah arranged a sprig in a brass vase on the mantel. I hovered nearby, hands resting lightly on the countertop, observing her practiced movements. Each throw blanket folded over an armrest, each cushion fanned at a precise angle, spoke of a narrative I had seeded. This home would soon belong to strangers who truly valued its space. By mid-morning, the photographer arrived, camera bag slung over his shoulder and a soft click-click as he unloaded lenses. The shutter's mechanical whisper echoed through the living room as he framed the perfect shot of the kitchen island, sunlight dancing on polished countertops. I stood back, feeling the hard-won taste of satisfaction rise in my chest. The image of my old home, now staged to sell, would travel across screens and inboxes, each click bringing us closer to a resolution I had long needed. I settled at my desk, laptop open to the real estate platform, and refreshed the listing page. A glossy cover photo appeared. The newly staged living room with its neutral palette and inviting layout. My heart thumped as the first inquiry alert pinged, a direct message from a local couple eager for a private showing. Then 2 more, then 3. Each notification felt like validation. My decisive action had set a course that even I couldn't have predicted with such swift momentum. A gentle breeze wafted through open windows, ruffling linen curtains and carrying the distant bray of seabirds from the nearby shore. The mix of salt air and fresh paint was grounding, reminding me that boundaries, once drawn, could yield transformative freedom. My phone buzzed with texts from Michelle confirming weekend open house time slots. Saturday at 10, Sunday at 2. I replied with concise affirmation, each keystroke a step toward finality. I rose and stepped out onto the deck, now a pristine stage framed by potted hydrangeas and wicker seating. Empty cups and stray napkins from last night's party had been whisked away, replaced by perfect settings that spoke of possibility rather than conflict. I drew in a slow breath, tasting the crisp air like a promise of new beginnings. In that moment, I realized the final piece of the puzzle was nearly in place. The house would sell, the mortgage would lift, and I would step into a life of my own making. Yet beneath the satisfaction lurked anticipation, and a faint echo of what still awaited: Andrew's release, his return to a world he no longer recognized. As the final staging crates were loaded onto the van, I closed my laptop and steered my sedan towards Santa Clara County Jail, counting down to Andrew's release. I eased my sedan into a parking spot at the jail entrance just before 9 a.m., the morning sun glancing off concrete walls that loomed silent and unforgiving. The air smelt faintly of disinfectant, mingling with the distant perfume of early summer blossoms from a nearby planter. I slipped out and approached the visitor window, ID in hand. Behind the bulletproof glass, a corrections clerk nodded at my release authorization printout. "Your son, Andrew Bauer, will be processed out through the main gate momentarily." Her tone was polite, coldly factual. I found a vinyl bench under a flickering fluorescent light and settled onto its stiff cushion, the vinyl cool against my palms. Each minute ticked past like a drumbeat in my skull. Memories of Andrew's defiance on my deck replayed in my mind, looping like a worn film reel. The sterile hum of vents overhead underscored my anticipation. At exactly 9 o'clock, steel bars clanked and a tall officer emerged, motioning toward the gate. There he was, my son, shaking as he stepped into the sunlight, clad in a navy jumpsuit that hung too loosely on his frame. His hair was rumpled, eyes wary. For a moment, he looked every bit the boy I once cheered at Little League games, vulnerable and unguarded. He saw me and faltered. I straightened, pressing my palms into my thighs to steady my own nerves. "I'm here," I said softly. He nodded, voice caught somewhere between anger and relief. "Dad," he whispered. The single word weighted with years of unspoken truths. We drove in silence, the engine's drone a backdrop to his tremors. The world outside blurred: schoolyards, cafes, the chapel spire where he'd been baptized.
When we turned onto Maple Drive, the street felt both familiar and alien under the golden glow of morning. I parked across from our old home. Andrew climbed out, duffel in hand, and paused at the curb. The sold sign in the front yard gleamed under dew-speckled hydrangeas. A fresh open house flag fluttered beside the driveway. My heart clenched as I watched him process the scene. He moved forward in hesitant steps. Where cedar planks once bore his laughter, a staged veranda now showcased neutral furniture and potted tulips. Two strangers, Carlos and Maria, unpacked boxes, their children chasing a puppy across the lawn. The sight struck Andrew like a physical blow. He froze, duffel slipping from his grip, hitting the pavement with a muted thud. I walked around the car and stopped a few feet behind him. "They're the new owners," I said, voice calm. His shoulders sagged, jaw tightening as dread rippled across his face. Maria approached, holding out a white envelope with care. He took it with a trembling hand, folding it open like a sacred relic. Inside, my words waited in crisp black script. "You said you wanted me gone from your life. I'm granting that wish. This house has been sold, and I will be unreachable indefinitely. You now have the independence you demanded. Dad." The paper fluttered as he read, eyes widening, disbelief and sorrow warping his handsome features. He sank to the bottom step, letter clutched to his chest, shoulders shaking with pain. The morning breeze carried the distant laughter of open house visitors, a mocking symphony to his collapse. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a bittersweet triumph mingled with regret. Respect had been reclaimed, but at the cost of a father-son bond washed away in cold precision. Under the rising sun, Andrew sat alone on the stranger's porch, confronted with the true price of his own demands. As the sun climbed overhead, I turned my back on the sold sign and drove away, heading for the one refuge I still trusted, Frank's front porch. I guided my sedan down the familiar street toward Frank Collins's bungalow, the late morning sun glinting off the license plate. Each turn brought back memories of weekend barbecues and idle chats over coffee, a simpler time when respect was mutual and laughter was easy.
The breeze, slipping through the cracked window, carried the scent of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass, a stark contrast to the bitter tang of yesterday's confrontations. Arriving at Frank's driveway, I eased the car onto the gravel and cut the engine. The hum of the neighborhood faded, replaced by the hush of his wisteria-draped porch. I gathered my resolve, grabbed my duffel from the back seat, and crossed the lawn. The oak door stood steadfast, its paint chipped by years of sun and storms. I raised a hand and knocked, each rap echoing in my chest like a plea for sanctuary. Frank opened the door in well-worn jeans and a button-up shirt, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the light. "Robert?" he said, voice warm with concern. "You okay?" I managed a nod, throat tight. "May I stay here for a few days? I need a place to think." He stepped aside without hesitation. "Always. Come on in." Inside, the interior smelled of leather and old books. The living room couch sank invitingly beneath me as I settled down, duffel at my feet. A late-model radio murmured an old jazz standard from the corner speaker, its mellow notes weaving through the quiet. Frank poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to me. The aroma was comforting, earthy and familiar. We sat in companionable silence, the morning light slanting through pastel curtains and dust motes dancing in its beams. Daisy, his golden retriever, patted over and pressed her head against my knee, soft eyes brimmed with empathy. I reached down and scratched behind her ears, the softness of her fur grounding me in the present. Frank cleared his throat. "Do you want to talk about it?" I exhaled slowly, lifting my mug to my lips. The coffee was bold and dark. I cradled the warmth in my hands as memories surfaced. Andrew's mocking salute, the crunch of gravel beneath the cruiser's tires, the finality of that 4-line letter. "I sold the house," I admitted, voice low. "I had to. But now I'm not sure what comes next." Frank nodded, setting his mug on the coffee table. "You did what you needed to do," he said quietly. "Sometimes boundaries demand action." His words were gentle yet firm, a lifeline thrown across my swirling doubt. I leaned back, closing my eyes to the afternoon sun warming my face. The soft creak of leather as Frank shifted in his armchair blended with the ticking of a mantel clock. Outside, children's laughter drifted faintly from a passing school bus. Life moved on, indifferent to my upheaval. In that borrowed space, I felt the sharp edge of loneliness soften. The weight of obligation I had carried for decades began to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of possibility. Here, off my own property and outside the glare of everyday expectations, I could rebuild. I opened my eyes and looked at Frank, gratitude shining in my gaze. "Thank you," I said simply. He offered a knowing smile. "Get some rest. When you're ready, we'll figure out the next step. Together." I sank deeper into the couch cushions, Daisy curling beside me, and let the calm wash over my storm-worn heart. Outside Frank's window, the world carried on in gentle rhythms. Inside, I found the refuge I had needed, not just for a few days, but for the beginning of a new life, defined by choice rather than compulsion. As the wind rustled the wisteria outside, I settled at Frank's old writing desk, drew a deep breath, and reached for the stack of blank envelopes waiting beside a dim lamp. I sat at the narrow oak desk under the lamp's soft halo, its satin glow pooling over crisp stationery and my lined journal. The room smelled of old books and polished wood, a calm cocoon around my racing thoughts. My pen hovered above the first envelope, and I closed my eyes, recalling the crackle of fireworks and Andrew's harsh words. The ancient clock on the mantel ticked with patient rhythm, each second a reminder that time had brought me both to ruin and to possibility. Opening my journal, I scrawled a date at the top of the page, July 12th, and began. "Dear Andrew, I owe you more than apologies. I raised you on traditions and protection, believing my sacrifice would earn your respect. Instead, I subsidized your contempt. For that, I'm sorry." My pen scratched in a steady arc, each word a stone lifted from my chest. I described the weight of 30 years spent providing, college tuition, birthday cakes, midnight drives, then the sting of hearing you wish I'd vanish. I wrote of my regret, that love without boundaries became a cage. I paused and dipped the nib into the ink, the air faintly perfumed by honeysuckle drifting through the open window. Outside, cricket song wove through the night, an unconscious lullaby urging me on. I continued. I set boundaries to reclaim my dignity, but I never wanted to destroy ours. I hope, in time, you'll understand why I chose action over silence. I wish you courage to build a life of your own choosing, unshackled by my interference. The cursive flowed unevenly as emotion caught in my throat, and I pressed my thumb over the final stroke. Sealing the envelope, I traced the edges with a fingertip, feeling the folded crease beneath my skin. I wrote no return address. These letters were for you alone to read when you were ready. Beneath the lamp, I prepared a second note, one more informal, simply 3 lines expressing pride in the man you might yet become if you learn that respect is earned, not owed. I tucked both into my jacket pocket, their presence a tether to the man I hoped to be. Daisy nudged my hand, soft eyes glowing in the lamplight. I stood and stretched, the lamp's glow spinning off a brass picture frame on the desk, our family portrait from years ago, before expectations turned to demands. I glanced at it with a gentle sorrow, then switched off the lamp. Darkness filled the room, pierced only by muted streetlights beyond the curtained window. Lying back on the sofa, journal closed on my chest, I let the gravity of my words settle into my bones. The letters remained unsent. They were my confession and my compass. In the hush, I realized that by giving voice to my truth, I had reclaimed my own narrative. Tomorrow, I would face the day not as an enabler or avenger, but as a man finally clear on the boundaries he must uphold, and the love he still carried for a son who might one day understand. After leaving the letter quietly in my pocket, I put on my hat and stepped out into the morning light, determined to find a new turn in the people around me. I walked the few blocks from Frank's house to the pier where the weekly farmers market had just set up. The air smelled of salt and fresh coffee from the corner cafe, mingling with the earthy aroma of mussels and seaweed displayed on low wooden tables. Brightly painted stalls sold handmade quilts, local honey in glass jars, and woven baskets cradling driftwood knickknacks. I paused at a stall labeled Maggie's Clam Shack, where an elderly woman in a blue apron sorted freshly steamed clams. "Morning," I said, tipping my Stetson. "Mornin', newcomer," Maggie replied with a broad smile. "You must be the fella Frank mentioned, picking up your first week in Ocean Breeze?" I nodded, glancing at her neat rows of shellfish. "Yes, Michael Bauer. Nice to meet you. Mind if I grab a half-dozen clams for breakfast?" "Not at all. Always nice to have fresh faces. You a fisherman by trade?" "Retired engineer," I smiled, handing over a bill. "Now I'm learning the tides instead of spreadsheets." She laughed, her eyes crinkling. "You'll fit right in. Folks here respect hard work, from industry to oyster racks." Clutching my bag of clams, I drifted toward a cluster of neighbors gathered around a weathered picnic table. Children chased a seagull stray, and a group of volunteers pinned flyers to a bulletin board announcing Saturday's beach cleanup. A man in a faded flannel waved. "Hey there, you must be Michael. I'm Tom Bennett, just down the road. Welcome to our little corner of paradise." "Tom, good to meet you." I extended my hand and felt the firm grip of a lifelong coast dweller. "I saw the flyer. I'd like to help clean up the bay tomorrow. It's good to give back." "Fantastic," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Meet us at dawn by the boat ramp. We supply gloves and coffee." I watched them disperse and stepped to a small cafe where a chalkboard announced homemade clam chowder. Inside, the aroma of bacon fat and simmering stock enveloped me. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with sun-kissed skin, greeted me. "You alone, hun?" "Just me," I replied. "Chowder, please." She ladled a steaming bowl and set it before me. "On the house for our newest neighbor." I blinked, touched. "Thank you, I appreciate it." She winked. "Just pay it forward. That's how we do things round here." Outside, I sat on a bench overlooking the water, spooning rich broth under the overhead cries of gulls. As I ate, I thumbed the edge of my notebook and considered my journey. From the betrayal of my own son to this moment of genuine welcome by strangers turned friends. Each taste of chowder, each nod from passing locals reminded me that community was built on mutual respect and small acts of kindness. Finishing my bowl, I rose and strolled to the dock's end, leaning on the railing as waves lapped below. The harbor glittered with bobbing boats, and the town's steeple rose in the distance like a beacon. In that reflective hush, I felt a stirring of hope. Here, among people who saw me as a neighbor rather than a father in crisis, I could forge a new identity, one grounded in contribution, connection, and the freedom to define myself anew. I woke just as the sky blushed pale peach and lavender, the soft hiss of waves undercutting the distant cry of gulls. The rented bungalow's hardwood floors were cool beneath my bare feet as I padded to the window. Beyond the railing, the Pacific stretched infinite, each breaker catching dawn's light in a fleeting sparkle. I inhaled the salt-laced air, tasted freedom on my tongue. In the kitchenette, a small propane stove stood ready. I filled a chipped mug with strong coffee, its bitter steam swirling around me, and stepped onto the wraparound porch. Daisy bounded ahead, tail aloft, nose pressed to every driftwood drift and seaweed tuft. I sipped the coffee slowly, feeling its warmth climb from my chest to my shoulders. Behind me, the room's pastel walls glowed softly, but my focus was on the horizon's promise. Down at the shoreline, I kicked off sandals and let the damp sand squish between my toes. Each footprint pressed a new beginning into the grainy earth. The breeze tugged at my shirt, carrying fragments of morning songs. A fisherman's whistle as he hauled nets, children's laughter chasing foam, and the steady slap of tide against driftwood. I bent to trace a strand of sea glass, its edges worn smooth by countless tides, a reminder that even the hardest surfaces soften over time. Back at the bungalow, I sank into a wicker chair on the porch, journal in hand. The pages welcomed my pen. I wrote of sunrise's clarity, of waves' unending rhythm mirroring life's ebb and flow, of the peace that comes when one finally stands on firm ground of self-determination. Each sentence felt like a stake driven into new soil under my feet. A light knock sounded at the door. It was Tom Bennett from the cleanup crew, early for our beach event. He handed me a reusable tote lined with gloves and trash bags, grinning. "Ready to make this shoreline shine?" he asked. I nodded, gratitude warming me more than the sun. Absolutely. As we walked toward the boat ramp, I paused at the dune's crest. The town's steeple peaked above clustered roofs, framed by rolling waves. In that moment, I felt the tension of past weeks dissolve into the morning mist. Boundaries had been drawn, respect reclaimed, and now each dawn offered the chance to build something new, one grain of sand at a time. After we packed up the final bags on the beach, I felt the tide turning, for my son and for myself, and knew it was time to bring this journey to its final shore. The rental cottage stood quiet in the late afternoon sun as I returned from the beach cleanup, hands still faintly crusted with sand and salt. Inside, the rooms that had once held echoes of my old life now welcomed new memories. A simple vase of daisies, soft blue throws, and the morning's first batch of mail on the kitchen counter. I retrieved my duffel from the back seat and laid the 2 sealed letters on the counter, one for Andrew, one for his future self to find when the time was right. Over the following weeks, I settled into a routine that felt both novel and healing. I volunteered at the community center, teaching basic carpentry to neighborhood kids, and spent evenings at Maggie's Clam Shack, sharing stories with locals who had no idea of my past. I watched the sun dip behind the headland each night, casting the water in molten gold, and felt my heart unfurl from its long-held tension. One crisp morning, I gathered courage and drove back to Maple Drive to witness the final closing. The sold sign was gone, replaced by a neatly trimmed hedge and 2 small flags bearing the new owner's initials. I parked discreetly down the street and walked up to the porch, running my fingers over the polished railing. Memories rose, birthday cakes, holiday lights, the sting of that last cruel word. But I pressed on, stepping past the doorway and leaving the envelope for Andrew's return. I turned away without looking back, the house receding behind me like a chapter closing. My phone buzzed with a text. "Congratulations on a successful sale. Bonus has been wired." A surge of satisfaction warmed me, not at the money earned, but at the principle restored. I tucked the phone away and began my drive toward the coast, where a new sun awaited. In the passenger seat, Daisy lay curled in a patch of afternoon light, her soft breathing a steady lullaby. I stroked her fur, marveling that peace could grow from the harshest soil. The road wound toward the cliffs, and I parked at my favorite overlook. Together, we watched the waves break, relentless, patient, ever-renewing. In their rhythm, I heard the promise of futures unbound by the past. True freedom, I learned, is not the absence of obligation, but the presence of clear boundaries. Respect grows when actions are aligned with words, and love endures when it's tempered by accountability. Sometimes, the hardest choices yield the greatest clarity, and stepping away from what once defined us opens space to rediscover our worth. In granting my son his independence, I found my own, and with it, the strength to embrace a life built on both compassion and conviction. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of loss, reckoning, and rebirth. If Michael's story resonated with you, whether you faced tough boundaries or craved second chances, please give this video a thumbs up and share your own experiences in the comments below. Your insights help us build a community that honors resilience and respect. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss our weekly stories of redemption and hope. If you know someone who could benefit from a reminder that true dignity comes from both love and accountability, share this video with them today. Ready for the next adventure? Click the box on your screen now to keep exploring life's powerful lessons.